Hello and welcome to the Sci Guys, the show where we talk about the crazy, weird, and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Luke Cutforth, and the special guest, the fifth Sci Guy, NOAHFINCE.
Yay!
This week we're talking about Corey's Little Helper. But first, we have to go through a wee review. This one says, the Sci Guys are a vibe for real, for real. Okay, so I've always been a science person. I love learning, but the way the Sci Guys just discuss is amazing. Every time I get up in the morning, it's the only podcast I ever look forward to seeing new episodes from, and good job, Sci Guys, keep it up. Wow, it was 5 stars as well.
That's so lovely.
Sounds like you wrote that.
I didn't write that,
that
actually.
Enthusiastic.
Well, why don't you go and try and write a review from me on Apple Podcasts for 5 stars for Sci Guys. That's a fun challenge too. Go ahead and do that.
It's like a role-play game.
Do you know what else is like a role-play game, but not at all? This question I'm about to ask. And if you want to answer this question, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or anywhere really, get to YouTube, get down to the comments and answer this question there. The question is, do you have ADHD and do you take medication?
Oh, yes.
Good job.
I suspect so.
You suspect you take medication? I'd hope you'd know, Luke.
In my sleep.
So that is obviously the topic of this episode today. It is ADHD medication and ADHD, I guess. We've already done an episode on ADHD. We've done a bunch of episodes on those kind of surrounding topics. You can go and check those out now. But first off, my question for you is, what is ADHD? Does anyone know?
Explain.
I do. Well, it stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. But, you know, what happens when you have ADHD? You're quite fidgety, can't really focus. You feel, at least in my case, I feel overstimulated all the time. And yeah, it's a very not fun experience.
I'm sure it's not. No, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, as you said, characterized by restlessness, inattentiveness, hyperactivity, all of these things. Man, I passed that test with flying colours. Almost got full marks. Almost.
Me too. We got the exact same score.
Which is insane,
just on
right?
different things.
Yeah. We were both missing just one. So
Yeah.
it's like 17 out of 18, I think we got.
Yes, there's like a poll, not a poll. There's a section for hyperactivity and a section for inattentiveness. And I think I got 9 out of 9 on hyperactivity and 8 out of 9 on inattentiveness.
A little round of applause for NOAHFINCE there, I think. But yeah, ADHD medications. There are a bunch of different ADHD medications. There are non-stimulant medications and stimulant medications, but we're mostly going to be focusing on stimulant medications today, like the ones that I use, because those are generally the most common ones that you'll see people using.
Yeah.
And the 5 different ones that are licensed for treatment of ADHD in the UK are methylphenidate. Oh, I should have read these before. Lisdexamphetamine, dexamphetamine, atomexetin. Why did I do this?
No, this is great. I'm really enjoying this.
Guanfacine. Look, the NHS says that these medicines are not a permanent cure for ADHD, but may help someone with the condition concentrate better, be less impulsive, feel calmer, and learn and practice new skills.
More of a temporary cure then.
Well, it's like a Band-Aid, isn't it? Yeah, so, I mean, like ADHD, as we said, neurodevelopmental disorder, it means that you're neurodivergent. Ultimately, your brain works in a slightly different way, which means it's a lot harder for you to focus on things, or rather, I guess it's harder for you to choose to focus on things, right?
Yeah. It's the whole distracted part. I'll try really hard to focus on one thing and then spend 8 hours cleaning because I'm like, oh, that seems like something that will give me a lot of dopamine when I'm finished.
Exactly, yeah, and you've kind of hit on it there. Dopamine is one of these main issues when it comes to ADHD. I mean, I'm sure all of us in this room know this because we've done episodes on it before, but ADHD is something that we don't fully understand. We do think that it's got quite a lot to do with dopamine, but then nothing has been fully proven, like finished, done science. Not that there is any kind of done science, but we've not kind of come to a complete and sure conclusion on it yet. But
yeah,
we're pretty sure that dopamine is involved, right?
They'll just pump us full of drugs, though.
Hey, it worked.
It does work, to be fair.
One thing I do want to mention, though, and I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this, and anyone that's tried to look up ADHD information online has experienced this. A lot of this has been focused towards kids. So whenever I try and do this research, I do like to, I obviously look at papers on this, I look at studies, but I also like to look at the more sort of, layman-facing things, like looking at the NHS, looking at the CDC, looking at all of these sorts of medical, medical bodies and the advice that they give on that, because it's very useful to build an episode from. The issue is that it's all, hey, this is what you and your kids can do.
Yeah.
Here's how to deal with your problem child. Does your child have ADHD? Give them this drug and maybe their teachers won't complain at you so much. It's very, very difficult to wade through all of this stuff to find the adult ADHD information.
It's almost like the vibe of them needing like parents of ADHD support club. Like that's how it's written about in a lot of places. Like even like because I was researching before I got my ADHD diagnosis, and half of the stuff I was looking at was for kids, and I was like, this does not apply to me. I need to figure out how to set my own schedule. I don't need to figure out how to get my child to follow a schedule.
Oh, exactly, right? And it's really difficult as well when you do have those things that are about adults with ADHD directly below all the things they're saying about kids with ADHD, because it's saying, look how terrible your kid is poorly behaved, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to the adult part and it's like, oh, well, you can try doing these things. And it's so weird because you've just seen the way that they talk about a child as though they're a dog or a problem that needs to be fixed, you know, like a dog to be trained or a problem to be fixed. And then you get to the adult part where it's like, hey, look, we don't really know what we can do for you. Here are some drugs, maybe try some therapy.
Yeah.
Just organize your life better.
It's especially strange because, I mean, I assume at some point we may find out from you when ADHD was sort of came into the lexicon. That's possible in the episode. But these kids grow up. They do become adults with ADHD.
Yeah.
What
do they do then?
Leaving aside the fact that lots of adults are being diagnosed with ADHD and it's actually clinically underdiagnosed in the UK.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, kids with ADHD grow up and they might be like, oh, I haven't got a parent to tell me what to do all the time now, so I will now find out this stuff myself.
That's literally how I felt, because like my mum is lovely. My mum was great. She would cook like me 3 meals a day. So that meant that, you know, my day was broken up and I knew what to expect and I always had food. But then as an adult, I'm like, oh, wait, like how do I do this for myself?
I had that same sort of, I guess, culture shock almost when I went from going to school and I had to go to school every day. And that was a hard rule that I just couldn't break. And so it was, I mean, not easy, but it was doable to fit into that sort of schedule because everything else needed to work around it. Yes, I didn't sleep at night. Yes, I fell asleep in school. But hey, I got the grades, so it didn't really matter what I did. Then I went to university, where you need to actually work in university in order to do well. And that was really bloody difficult. I had no way of controlling my own schedule. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to make myself focus when I needed to, because I could, up until that point, I could get by on not focusing until literally the last possible minute and then learning it all anyway or doing everything anyway. Because school is relatively easy in comparison to university.
No, me too. I literally got an academic award and I didn't revise once. I was just lucky that the subjects I did were like things that I was interested in. So I could put energy into focusing on them because I'm like, oh, this is really cool. But like any subject where I had no interest in it, it was just no. Yeah. Just no.
It's so difficult. I mean, this is something that kind of is kind of related to that as well. Like, you know, sort of the last minute cramming is that when it came to sort of learning scripts and stuff, because I did theatre in high school, that was very, very easy if I just waited until I absolutely had to do it and then I learned it. For example, for auditions and stuff, I didn't know anything about the audition piece until maybe the day before the audition. And I still got the roles because I had thought about it, but I did not learn any of it until I went in. And that kind of culminated at a point where in my last year of school, they changed the day of the auditions from one day to the next day. And because I'd crammed it for that one day, by the following day, I had no idea. I went in and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, man. Like, I don't remember any of this.
Also, hello, Sci Guys listeners. If you're ever wondering how Corey manages to do these episodes, he will stay up for like 24 hours. One weekend, he stayed up the entire weekend just to study the Sci Guys episodes because he can't do anything unless there's a deadline. Like, that's what ADHD is like in adulthood. It's not just like, oh, sometimes I get distracted.
I had this I think I've spoken about this on the podcast before, but I have these two very crucial, frustrating memories. So everything I say about ADHD, I'm going through the process of seeing if I can get a diagnosis. I'm pretty sure I have ADHD.
Me too.
I do not have diagnosed ADHD, but I'm certain I have it. And everything I say that's like, oh, this is my experience, I've usually cross-referenced with someone with a diagnosis, and they've gone, yeah,
absolutely.
And I have this experience, these two memories of like the first time I ever went to the doctor to say I'm depressed. I said, I don't feel depressed, I feel like I can't focus, and that makes me sad. And they were like, have some antidepressants. And then I went to the therapist, and I was like, oh, I feel like every time I have something to do, like I can't get myself to do it until just before it's due, and then I get like a burst of like anxiety because the thing's about to happen and it's about to be too late, and then I get loads of motivation. And they were like, well, anyway, tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, that's so common. The amount of people that are like, especially in like young women will be diagnosed, I don't know statistically, but like a lot of young women will be diagnosed with depression instead of ADHD. Like there are so many people with ADHD that end up being prescribed antidepressants purely for that reason.
I was diagnosed with both depression and anxiety when I was in university, which, I was depressed and anxious. Not untrue. However, the issues that I was having with university work weren't necessarily always related to being depressed and anxious. I mean, I think the depression, sure, that could affect things. But the anxiety mainly just came from not being able to get stuff done and then feeling anxious about that and only being able to work until like when the anxiety just sort of reached like a tipping point, and suddenly, I was able to smash through all of it.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, another thing, I mean, if you're sort of kind of dithering, do I have ADHD? Do I not? How do I relate sort of these diagnostic criteria, these things I've seen online to my personal experiences? Just to share some things from my life that I remember that looking back, I'm like, I should have noticed this before. I never once wrote an essay plan, ever. Even when in exams, the most I would do is be like, okay, I'm going to write an essay plan at the top of this thing, just so they think that I've written an essay plan, and then I'll just smash through it anyway.
I literally had this in RS where I was my RS teacher would tell people off for not writing essay plans, but he never told me off. He was like, "You're fine," because I just got full marks.
Yeah,
because it was all in my head.
Once when I was in high school, I got moved between sort of 1 year and the next. I was moved from the top math set to the second top math set, and most of my other mates were in the top math set. And the only reason I was moved down was because of, weird sort of grade boundaries, the way that they divvied up the year. And I was like, this is boring for me, and I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do was just, I suddenly had a burst of like, okay, I'm going to actually try here now. And I tried really hard, and I got moved up in a couple months. But one of the main things was that I just refused to do any working ever. I just wrote down the answers for the teacher enough to piss him off and get rid of me, essentially. Like, all of these sorts of things of like never writing an essay plan, not being able to stand at all doing something that remotely bores you, sitting in a towel for like 2 hours after you get out of a shower because you just can't move or do anything, lying in bed thinking, I would really like to get up and do a thing, or I really should move my legs or my arms, and just not being able to translate the thinking I should move my body to the actual moving of your body.
Having 4-hour baths.
Yeah, literally. If you're sometimes able to focus really hard on things, and other times you feel completely incapable of doing anything, that could be ADHD.
I did a talk the other day at a school about filmmaking and social media, and I talked about that, and a teacher was like, at the end, was like, you have ADHD.
I wish one of my teachers had told me about it. But
Mine did. My psychology teacher told me that I did. And so I was allowed to just walk around the classroom because I'd finished my work like 10 minutes before anybody else. So I'd literally just like stand up, and she'd be like, yeah.
Go for a little walk.
Just going on a walk.
Otherwise he'll fiddle.
No, I will. Yeah. I would like swing on my chair, and it would just piss people off.
But then things like that genuinely help, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about medication today because there are different ways of not, I guess, treating or helping deal with ADHD. Obviously, I think you could do sort of CBT, which is your standard. You could do CBT for almost anything, right? To help you deal with the difficulties of, living with ADHD in a world that isn't set up to deal with people who have ADHD. It's not that CBT itself will necessarily change the ADHD. It'll just change how you feel and deal with those sorts of situations somewhat. But yeah, we're talking about medication today. And I mean, I guess, first off, what does ADHD medication do? We're talking mostly about stimulants here, so just answer this for stimulants.
I feel like Luke will know more than me. I know it has something to do with like dopamine releasing and absorption, and also like norepinephrine? Norepinephrine. It's to do with the neurotransmitters in your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, do you have a more in-depth?
Not really, no.
Okay, fantastic. So to understand how ADHD medication works, first off, we need to understand how the brain works. Slightly, not too in-depth, because the brain is very complicated. What's really interesting to me right now, by the way, slight aside, is that all of this is happening in my brain right this minute as I'm saying all of this.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to understand more deeply, just think about what's happening in my brain right now, I guess.
Or your own brain.
Oh, yeah, if you're on ADHD
What's
medication
going
right
on
now.
in Corey's brain? Oh, you mean because you've taken ADHD
Because
medication?
I've taken my medication.
Oh, brilliant.
Me and Corey are both on the same ADHD medication right now.
Yeah, I
That's
had
the
to
only
copy
reason
Noah.
we can sit down and stay in the same room without jumping around or
I can-
smacking each other.
I can no, I do like to hit things. Anyway, so how does the brain work? As we know, the brain is made up of neurons, which have tiny little gaps in the middle of them. Right? What are those little gaps called?
Synapse.
That was it.
Well done. Yeah. So basically, pretty much everything that goes on in your body that's controlled by the brain, right? More or less. Someone's going to get in the comments and say that's actually not true. But the brain controls a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's its job. And the way that it controls that, the way that these messages are sort of sent, is through little chemical messengers across synapses, right? These different neurons interact with each other, and that creates your entire experience of being a person.
Yes.
It's very complicated. I'm not going to go too in depth, but that's basically how it works, right? They send information to each other using chemical messengers, neurotransmitters, right? And they are produced within a neuron. Neurotransmitters are generally produced within a neuron. They release the neurotransmitter, and then it travels across the synapse, and then it can be accepted by the next neuron, and that transmits information. Information like, I don't know, be excited, or this thing, that thing, right? Like,
That's very vital, important information.
I mean, it genuinely is, yeah. And so these, obviously, for that message to be transferred, it needs to be able to get through, right? It needs to then be accepted by the other neuron, and on top of that, you need to have enough there for enough neurons to be affected. All of that sort of stuff, right? Because it's a physical, it is just a physical process. I mean, pretty much everything in your body is a physical process, right? It's a chemical going from one place to another, being accepted, and then that creates some kind of outcome.
Crazy that it's so small that it doesn't feel physical.
Yeah,
It's
right.
weird.
And that's why I
You're
need
so
to say
big.
it.
I'm feeling all my neurotransmitters right now.
But
You know?
exactly, that's why I need to say that it is a genuine physical reaction because it's in your brain. It doesn't feel like that. I mean, if you think about it, every single thing that I am saying right this minute, it's all these little things are going on in my brain, which are transmitting electrical signals through all of the different parts of my body that need to get them. And I am performing this very complex, sort of, I guess, relatively speaking, very complex action of explaining exactly what I'm doing whilst moving my hands and my fingers and looking at both of you and thinking about everything that's going on and thinking about this. All of that sort of stuff, reading Noah's top at the same time, all of this is happening based on physical things moving in your head.
Imagine
right?
you could actually feel that. It would take up so much energy to experience every reaction that's happening in your body.
But then, if you were experiencing all the things that were going on in your body, then you'd have to have other processes that experience those things. So then you wouldn't be experiencing that.
You've lost me.
So if neuron A sends dopamine to neuron B, right? And you were like, and we don't normally experience that. And you were like, but imagine if you did.
Yeah.
You'd need a third neuron that was doing the experiencing of that in order for you to experience it. And you wouldn't be experiencing that third neuron experiencing the first two.
And you're just making this in your brain.
Yeah,
you're just speaking
it
words.
Doesn't make any sense.
We're just experiencing that right now.
And that's the thing, your brain tunes out so much. Unless you have ADHD, in which case sometimes it just doesn't. For example,
Yes.
I don't like sitting in the living room when certain noises are there because I cannot tune them out. Like the humming of electrical things, it gets in. I can't get rid of it.
I can't watch TV when the washing machine is on, or if somebody is watching TikToks, or if there's a strong smell. I feel like I have.
You have autism,
abnormal-
which might be confounding these results.
Yeah.
No, but the point here is that neurotransmitters transmit signals in your brain, and I just want you to understand that a neuron needs to accept a neurotransmitter along with a neuron releasing a neurotransmitter. Yeah, a neurotransmitter just being there isn't necessarily, it just floating around there isn't necessarily going to do something unless it interacts with something.
It's that kind of thing with ADHD medication where you have a neuron that doesn't accept it and the medication helps it accept it.
That's
like
we'll get into how they all work. So as I've said, I'm just going to read this out verbatim here. It says, in order for these pathways to work effectively so that the message gets through, the neuron must produce and release enough of the neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter must also stay in the synapse for long enough for it to bind to the receptor site. I messed that up a little bit. Basically what it's saying is that the neurotransmitter, there needs to be enough of the neurotransmitter, it needs to be there for long enough, and it needs to bind to the other neuron.
Yeah.
Otherwise, again, this is a physical thing. Otherwise, it just being there isn't going to mean anything. Like if I could, I could sit here and we could record this entire episode, but if I don't say anything at all, I keep my mouth shut, you're not getting any of the information. I could be here and me not saying anything is going to change whether you understand the concept or not.
I know what you're thinking a lot of the time.
Right. What am I thinking right now then?
You're thinking, I knew he would say that, or you weren't thinking that.
Okay, well done. Good job. The point is that the neurotransmitter just being there isn't enough. There needs to be enough of it. It needs to actually bind to the other neuron. And once it's released, some of the sort of excess is then reabsorbed. And the issue is with with ADHD, what seems to happen apparently is that some of the neurotransmitter is reabsorbed too quickly. Right, so it's just reabsorbed before it can be absorbed before it can sort of bind to the other neuron. So you're producing, let's say you're producing dopamine, right? You're producing dopamine. There you go, some neurotransmitter, and you're like, oh, gonna take some back now, but you're taking it back too early before the other neuron has a chance to actually, receive it and essentially get that message.
It's
right?
kind of like edging.
I guess it is kind of like
It's
edging.
like, ooh, you want some of this? Nope.
Exactly. Sure. Let's say that it's your brain edging itself. So the idea here is that sometimes in ADHD brains, it seems that the message is kind of sent, but it's kind of taken back before it can be received. So the message isn't sent effectively. And what stimulants do is kind of try and get around this. So dopamine, norepinephrine. Do you know what norepinephrine is?
Yeah, it's noradrenaline. Also, it's to do with the adrenal gland. It's to do with like stimulation of adrenaline production, possibly. Something along those lines.
Is it noradrenaline has to do with like the feeling of like being rewarded, or is that dopamine?
So norepinephrine, it does a few different things in the body. It makes you more alert, sort of, it says arousal, right? So alertness, that whole sort of thing. It constricts your blood vessels, which maintains blood pressure when you're sort of stressed, that sort of like fight or flight sort of thing. And it has sort of roles in your sleep-wake cycle, mood, and memory. It does a lot of different things.
It's very interesting because these all have to do with like ADHD symptoms.
So dopamine and norepinephrine, they play quite a big role in the brain when it comes to ADHD. We kind of look at that and think, maybe ADHD brains aren't quite dealing with these in the right way, reabsorbing them too early, not sort of transmitting them properly, not transmitting the messages properly, and that's why you see sort of issues with reward, like so the reward center for the brain in people with ADHD. That's why it's difficult to motivate yourself. That's why you see people having issues with the sort of sleep-wake cycle and all of those sorts of things.
It sucks that it's actually something in the brain that is causing these symptoms. And it's annoying that a lot of people with ADHD are just told they're lazy their entire life.
Oh yeah,
and that they're just useless people, and that they'll never succeed. And it's just because they have like a little bit of a brain issue.
There is so much interesting psychology when it comes to ADHD because it's really difficult to separate, I guess, the sort of raw symptoms of ADHD.
Oh, and the trauma response to their treatment.
Yeah,
because
literally.
of the ADHD.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you're looking at someone who has ADHD, you're not just seeing someone who has something going on in their brain. You're seeing someone who has something going on in their brain who has had to live in a world that has said that, oh, you're lazy, you're this, you're that. They've learned all of these lessons from their upbringing. So I was reading a sort of a story the other day. I mean, this is just someone's personal experience. So this is an anecdote is what I'm telling you. This is not data. It's an anecdote. But someone essentially was talking about how they learned to, I guess, deal with stressful work situations. So for example, like a kid said, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this thing. I can't do this task, right? And a parent says, you can do this task. I've seen you do similar tasks before. I've seen you do this task before. You can do this. And they get irate. They get angry. They shout at them. Yeah. And the kid is like, oh, I need help. But they can't express what they're having difficulty with. And because they've got ADHD, it's the sort of motivation that just isn't there. They're unable to do it, even though they technically would be able to do it otherwise, or they might have done it before. And they're shouted at, they're not given the help that they need. And so that stress of being, I guess, sort of punished then pushes them over the line to be able, oh God, okay, I'm now able to do this. Because with ADHD, you might find it difficult to find motivation or have motivation, but high stress can kind of replace that normal ability to motivate yourself. And so the lesson learned there is not, like, if I ask for help, I'll get it. It's if I can't do something, I'm just going to get punished and then I'll have to do it anyway.
That's probably also why a lot of people with ADHD get burnout quite easily because the only way that they're motivated to do anything is like just this like stressful thing, and that's exhausting for the body. But also talking about like Luke is nodding a lot. Something interesting about the idea that like you're not just seeing somebody with like an ADHD brain, you're seeing the ADHD brain and also the result of their upbringing, which is because like rejection sensitive dysphoria is something that comes up a lot when you're looking into ADHD, where people with ADHD have a tough time
dealing with rejection.
Dealing with rejection or even like perceived rejection. And that could be something to do with the brain, but it also could be to do with the fact that they've experienced a lot of rejection in their past.
I think the way to sort of think of this is, okay, is this an issue specific to ADHD? Or if you were to take a neurotypical person and treat them the way that someone who has ADHD is treated, would they exhibit those symptoms as well? And that's a really interesting thing to sort of look at, because, I mean, you can't, I guess, treat those symptoms with, or signs, or whatever you want to call it. You can't treat those things with medication necessarily, because all the medication in the world isn't necessarily going to change the fact that you have learned that this is the outcome from sort of X input. But getting back to how the stimulants work. So we're talking about dopamine and norepinephrine. They play, a pretty important role in the brain. They kind of have, they play a part in executive function and in attention, which are two things that are very difficult if you've got ADHD. Executive function basically being able to carry out.
Tasks.
Yeah, can I ask about executive function actually? Because this is one of these like things I find fascinating, is that one of my, again, pre-diagnosis possible ADHD experiences is that I decide to do something, like I make the whatever process in your head is that you decide to do an action, like I decide to do something, and then I like get distracted, and then I'm like, oh, I meant to do that thing, and I decide to do it again, and then it doesn't happen. And then I get distracted, or I like get frustrated, or decide to take a break because it's not happening. And then it'll be like 3 days later, and I'm like, I decided to do that about 3 days ago, and it's still not. And it's like whatever center of my brain or whatever bit of me decides to do something, it passes it maybe via dopamine to another bit, and then it just sort of goes, okay, I've passed it, and that will be carried out, and then it goes, hang on, I decided to do that. Why didn't it happen? I'll decide again. Why is it not? And then you're just like,
It's like the part of your brain that sort of decides to do something and the part of your brain that then does the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those two parts are just very separated. Where I feel like for everyone else, if they think, oh yeah, I should probably get up to go to the toilet, because I need to pee, they'll just get up and do it. Whereas I have to think like, okay, I need to pee. I should get up and go to the toilet. And then I that doesn't mean that thing is going to immediately happen. Within the next 3 to 5 hours, maybe it will. But like,
and then your kidneys hurt.
Yeah, but like, and even then, my kidneys hurting isn't enough to make me get up. My kidneys can maybe hurt for an hour or so, and then I'll be like, okay, now I'm able to. And it's not choosing to. This is the difficult thing to explain. It's not laziness. It's not, oh, I can't be bothered. You could be sitting, willing your entire body to move with every ounce of strength that you've got. And that message just won't translate to the part of your brain that actually makes your body do the moving.
It's like it's moving through treacle.
Yeah.
I've sent the message, but the postman's really slow.
Okay. Have you ever tried sort of, when people talk about running in a dream and you try to run or you try to move in a dream and it's just not happening?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, right? Yeah.
I was literally just about to bring up a similar point to you that like it doesn't just apply to like, oh, I have this work thing that I need to do and I'm going to do it, and then you don't do it 3 days later. It literally can also apply to like needing to go to the toilet, trying to get out of bed in the morning, which results in a lot of people being late because no matter how hard they're trying to get out of bed, their body just doesn't cooperate.
I've always had an issue with getting out of the shower, especially grew up in Scotland, okay? It's cold in the winter. It's cold in the summer even. The shower generally is quite warm. I just cannot bring myself to leave it. I will be late for something that I've woken up in like plenty time to get to because I get in the shower and then I'm stuck in there for 30 minutes.
You decide to get out, and then your legs don't do the getting out bit.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'll get out, and I can. And this isn't just, oh, I'm on my phone, I'm not. I could literally be sat doing nothing, and still not be able to get out.
It's like you're in pause mode.
Yeah, literally pause mode, and this happens as well. Okay, let's say I've got plans in the evening or plans in the early afternoon, and I wake up at 10 a.m. and I've not got plans till maybe 2 p.m. Between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. I am on pause.
Yeah.
I must wait until 2 p.m. because that is when I am able to do the things.
Yeah.
And I can't, it's very difficult to try and get stuff done before then. The time just seems to go.
Yeah. Then that's why I specifically try and avoid plans that are in the middle of the day.
Oh, yeah.
Because if the plans are in the middle of the day, I'll wait until the middle of the day and then I'll do the plan and then I'll feel bad about myself for not doing the first thing that I was supposed to do. And then I spend the latter half of the day feeling bad about myself for not doing the thing that I was supposed to do in the morning.
So I think what we're trying to get across here is that one of the big issues with ADHD is being able to choose where to put your focus, attention, and energy. You know, that executive dysfunction makes it difficult to choose to do a thing and then do it. And the sort of difficulty with attention makes it difficult to pay attention to something that, you know, you're not necessarily wholly interested in, unless you've got a sort of mountain of anxiety behind you motivating you. So yeah, the two key things to pay attention to here are executive dysfunction and a sort of inattentiveness. These are the things that are really major issues with ADHD. And dopamine and norepinephrine, they kind of have a role in both of them. Ding-a-ling-ling, is that the ad bell?
He's ringing again. Why is he ringing this time, Corey?
He's ringing for After Dark, Luke.
Why have we gendered our ad bell, Corey?
Because he's a boy and I want to respect him just like I respect After Dark, our sister show to this podcast, Sci Guys. After Dark is what happens after Sci Guys ends. We just chat about whatever we want to chat about.
If you've ever been listening to Sci Guys and gone, God, I wish there were less facts, then you can listen to After Dark. I wish there were more opinions in this show.
More philosophy and politics.
Yes, After Dark is the show where Corey and I sit down, and maybe with a guest sometimes, sit down and discuss just more sort of floaty, woo-wooey ideas about things we think with our brains.
And where can they watch this wonderful, wonderful show, Luke?
Well, they can listen to it and watch it at patreon.com/Sci Guys, our Patreon, where you can also support us and help us keep doing this thing that you apparently like us doing.
Did you say patreon.com/Sci Guys?
Yes, I think I did. I think I did say patreon.com/Sci Guys.
Well, if you want to listen to After Dark, it seems like you should get to patreon.com/Sci Guys.
That's patreon.com/Sci Guys, in case you weren't paying attention.
Now pay attention, because we're about to start the show.
Oh, my attention has been paid and will continue to be paid until the end, when I go home.
So stimulant medication kind of works to combat those symptoms of ADHD by increasing the levels of dopamine in your brain.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily by just shoving more dopamine in there. We'll get into the sort of specifics in a second. But the idea is to essentially say, okay, well, it seems that dopamine is the issue here. Let's just increase the dopamine in the brain. So the way that they do that is just by, we mentioned the reabsorption. They just slow down the reabsorption, essentially. I don't think that's how they all work. We'll get into the specifics in a sec. But slowing down the reabsorption is a way to basically make it so that there's more dopamine in the brain. So because the reabsorption of dopamine is kind of held back by these stimulants, you essentially have more of the neurotransmitter. You've got more dopamine kicking around in the brain, which means it can be absorbed by the synapses, which means that message can be sent across, which means all of the things that dopamine is affecting can actually work properly. Or not necessarily work properly, but work better.
That's
right?
nice.
I know, right? Wouldn't
really
it be nice
nice.
if your brain just did that anyway? So essentially, this isn't, curing ADHD. It's not even necessarily specifically treating ADHD. It's just, I guess, masking some of the symptoms or making it easier to overcome some of the symptoms is kind of how it feels more when you're actually on them. I mean, we can explain all the sort of science and the chemistry behind them, but that doesn't necessarily give you a good idea of how it feels. But we'll get into that in just a bit. I mean, different stimulants obviously work in slightly different ways, and that can be, that kind of tells you why different people can have different experiences on different ADHD medications, because there are a bunch of different ones, and not everyone is on the same one. Not everything is going to work for everyone. It's kind of similar with sort of antidepressants. Not everyone is going to be on the same antidepressant. Not everyone's going to have the same experience on them, and it's really down to finding the one that is kind of right for you.
And presumably everyone has different types of a little bit different ADHD as well. I mean, the thing is, you can score very differently on all of these sort of different ADHD quizzes, and I mean, even between the three of us, we are not the same.
No.
And we all have ADHD, but we do not experience it all in the same way at all.
I was going to say my friend Phoenix, but all our friend Phoenix.
Not my friend.
Not my
I
friend.
hate that guy.
So I was the first out of all of us to get diagnosed with ADHD. I think mine was quite obvious because I'm just very hyperactive, and that's always been a thing. But whereas our friend Phoenix, his ADHD is mostly inattentive. So he wasn't experiencing like a lot of the symptoms that I was experiencing, but he had the same thing.
And I think that also goes some way to explaining some of the underdiagnosis, which I'm sure we'll get onto, because everyone knows that kind of like, what I did anyway, and a lot of people I speak to knows that kind of like archetype, stereotype of the ADHD kid in class.
Yeah.
And I know who the ADHD kid was in my primary school.
Yeah.
And I didn't fit in that mold. And you probably wouldn't fit in that mold.
Yeah.
Corey definitely wouldn't have fit in that mold.
For me, I think it's the gender aspect of it as well is very different, because like I was hyperactive, but because I was interested in the subjects that I was doing, I was fine. Like I did really well in school. So I think even if I did annoy people, and I did get moved across the class for talking and that kind of stuff. So in that aspect, I was kind of like the archetype. But because I did fine in school, it wasn't seen as an issue, which is interesting, because there are still things that I struggled with. I just didn't struggle with schoolwork.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that was it for me as well, that I did struggle in some cases. But schoolwork was fairly easy for me, so I didn't necessarily struggle with that. I struggled with, I mean, I didn't do homework. I didn't like doing homework. I always left it to but I left it to the very, very last minute.
Yeah.
I was late with a lot of it. I lost a bunch of things. I went through so many bloody school bags. I swear to God.
Pencil cases for
Pencil
me.
cases, gone, pens, pencils, everything. I destroyed shoes for some reason. I feel like that's related to ADHD. I don't know how.
Or being a dog.
Being a dog, sure. Yeah, and sort of all of these things. And the sort of atypical, I wouldn't even say atypical presentation, because it's not necessarily atypical, it's just not stereotypical.
Non-archetypal presentation. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, and I think that's the kind of difficulty there. Anyway, let's get back to the stimulants. So again, the stimulants work by essentially increasing the amount of dopamine that is kicking about in your head. So first off, we're going to talk about methylphenidate. And that is one that you might know about, Noah?
Yes, I'm on it. It's under lots of different brand names. It's like, people mostly know it as Ritalin. I think that's the most popular term for it. But then there's like Concerta, there's Zagotin, there's Delmosart. There's a bunch of different brands of it.
Metadate, Focalin, all of these different ones, yeah. And apparently it says research suggests that methylphenidate increases the levels of dopamine by blocking the reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine in your brain, which I don't like that it says research suggests that this is how it works. I feel like
not a fan.
I feel like we should know how it works.
As far as we're aware.
And another thing I should mention as well is that brain imaging studies. So basically, if you give someone stimulant and then you look at their brain, what you see is that their frontal cortex, the specific subcortical regions, and the cerebellum all light up, and all of those areas have a role in executive function. They're pretty important for executive function. So basically, they are more active when you give someone stimulants, which makes sense as to why it's used for ADHD, because executive function is an issue with ADHD. But yeah, so that's methylphenidate. It essentially blocks reabsorption of those two neurotransmitters to sort of help with those things of ADHD. It also apparently promotes dopamine release from within the neuron, which sends out more dopamine into the synapse. So not only is it stopping the reuptake or the sort of reabsorption of dopamine, it's also stimulating more dopamine production. Then we can move on to amphetamines, which are another type of stimulant medication, and they mostly just increase the release of dopamine and norepinephrine from where they are from where they are into the synapse. And I mean, it also slows the reuptake, but it says here that this is less significant. So the main thing that it does is stimulate the sort of release of it rather than just, downregulate the sort of reuptaking of it.
And is this Adderall?
Yeah, so that'd be Adderall, Vyvanse, and Dianavel. I should have read these before.
Is Elvance the same?
I think it is. So I think that would be lisdexamfetamine.
Oh, okay.
But don't take that 100%. Double check it yourself. I'm pretty sure. I mean, the thing is that there are a bunch of different brand names for these. There are only a few different chemical names. So, I mean, methylphenidate would be the most sort of common drug that's given for ADHD. So as you said, that would be Ritalin and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I could literally give you the different sort of full chemical names of all of these things. So Concerta would be methylphenidate extended release tablets.
Yeah.
Focalin is dexamethylphenidate. Metadate is methylphenidate hydrochloride, and Ritalin is methylphenidate.
Yeah.
Then you've got Adderall, amphetamine, dextroamphetamine, Dianavel. Dianavel is amphetamine. Vyvanse is lysodexamphetamine dimesylate. So basically, the way that this works is that they're all more or less the same sort of core molecule with slight differences. And now you're probably hearing this methylphenidate and you're thinking, oh, meth. Methyl doesn't necessarily mean meth.
No.
Meth is methamphetamine.
Yeah, that's methamphetamine anyway.
Methamphetamine. Do you know what the meth means when you're talking about chemistry?
Is it NH3 or...
So what meth means, it's just a name for a sort of group, a sort of chemical group. I mean, I say chemical group. It's really difficult to try and explain this without using the words that I learned in chemistry. Essentially, if you've got a carbon with sort of a few hydrogens on it, that would be that would have a sort of meth, and then it would be F if it's got 2 carbons with a sort of bunch of hydrogens. Essentially, these names, you know, sort of methane, ethane, butane, all of those
Elements.
No.
Gas.
No.
Gas? Methane? What is methane?
So
Gas.
those are
Molecules?
hydrocarbons. Those are hydrocarbon molecules, and the different names for them. So methane, ethane, butane, all the way up to sort of hexane, all of those sorts of things, right? That is just saying, here's how many carbons are in this molecule, right? So when we're talking about these sort of organic molecules sort of that are primarily carbon based, these are the sort of prefixes that we use to describe them. So meth just means there's, I guess, a methyl group on it. Basically, just one sort of carbon group attached to it, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, say, a carbon which has another carbon attached to it on that group, right? It is a lot simpler than I'm making it sound, but essentially Meth F, all of these different things are just telling you, okay, this is the kind of group that is attached to this molecule.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty straightforward if you know all of the sort of terminology, but it doesn't mean that whenever you see meth or methyl, that means that it is
Crystal
methamphetamine.
meth.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's not crystal meth.
No, exactly. And amphetamines are obviously like a fairly wide class of sort of drugs. You know, it doesn't mean that you're having the exact same thing that you're going to get off the street. Although, to be fair, right, cocaine was used as a painkiller at one point. I mean,
heroin.
Yeah, all of these things can still be used.
More or less.
Just because, you see a drug being a street drug, that doesn't mean that there isn't necessarily a therapeutic benefit to it.
Unless you ask the US drug class system.
Yes, but the US drug class system doesn't care about benefits. It just cares about who can we put in jail.
No, but what I mean is in the US drug class system, the class A or class 1 or whatever it is, literally is with no medical benefit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But then there's a bunch of stuff in there that does.
Yeah, no. But what you're missing is that the no medical benefit is secondary. The main thing is, how can we put more black people in jail? And I wish I was joking. Literally look up what I think it's Reagan, someone that worked with Reagan said specifically about their war on drugs. Anyway, so you've got methylphenidate and amphetamines. Those are sort of two of the main sort of types of ADHD stimulant medications. So let's talk a little bit more. About them. So methylphenidate is, as I said, the most commonly used one. That would be Ritalin and all those sorts of things. And it is offered to adults, teenagers, and children over the age of 5 with ADHD. Having been on Ritalin,
No.
man, I can't imagine a 5-year-old on Ritalin. That is just, that's mad to me. Obviously, some kids might need it as much as I do, but we'll get into the conversation about giving it to kids in a bit.
But like a 5-year-old, all they got to do is play, learn their times tables. You don't need to give a kid Ritalin just so they can learn their times tables. Like, just no.
We'll get into it.
You don't need to medicate kids that early, Jesus.
So usually you could take sorts of these different medicines as immediate release or long release, and the difference between that is whether you take it multiple times a day or once a day, or whether you take it when you just need sort of short bursts of being able to work. Kind of depends on who you are, what you're doing, and what works best for you. There are a bunch of different side effects, like increases in blood pressure and heart rate, loss of appetite, trouble sleeping, headaches, stomach aches, feeling aggressive, irritable, depressed, anxious, or tense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, worth it to get rid of the ADHD stuff. Then there's lysdexamphetamine, which I think is Elvance usually, right?
Yeah.
So that would be, those have similar side effects because it is another stimulant. Decreased appetite, aggression. You could also have drowsiness, dizziness, headaches, diarrhea, and nausea and vomiting.
Great.
Which is probably why it's not the most common one, because it's got those sort of other side effects on top of it. There's dexamphetamine, which is similar to lisdexamphetamine and works in the same way, and it's given to adults, teenagers, and kids over the age of 5 as well. And that can have decreased appetite, mood swings, agitation and aggression, dizziness, headaches, diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting as side effects as well. And then there's also atomoxetine.
How do you spell it?
ATOMOXETINE. I can't do it.
Atomexine.
Atomexetine.
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 So that works differently from other ADHD medications because it's an SNRI, which means it's a selective noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor, which means it's, I guess, to an extent, kind of more similar to antidepressants, than sort of those stimulants. It increases the amount of noradrenaline in the brain, and it basically does that by blocking the reuptake of it. So it's not being reabsorbed.
Okay, yeah.
It's just sitting out in. It's got more time in the brain to be sort of hit those synapses, hit those neurons. Across the synapses, and that's given to adults, teenagers, and kids over the age of 5.
Right.
If it's not possible to use the other two that we've mentioned.
Really? So they'd rather give you stimulants before giving you a non-stimulant drug?
I actually know someone with ADHD who's taking these. So in the same way as antidepressants, they actually take a while to build up in the body.
Okay.
So, and then also, presumably, if you then have taken them for a while for them to build up in the body, if you're having a bad experience, it's possible that it would take a couple of weeks for that to wear off, I guess.
And they also have slightly more severe side effects that are more similar to, say, the side effects one could experience on antidepressants, which we're not going to go into. But remember the antidepressants episode that we did?
Yeah.
So one of the side effects was was making some potential outcomes of depression more likely make depression worse.
Alignment.
Yes, those kinds of side effects can be possible on these, so it's generally preferred that you use the other ones first. But yeah, dizziness, headaches, irritability, nausea, vomiting, all of the same sorts of things. And if you're on this and you start to feel depressed, speak to your doctor immediately. I mean, ultimately, if you start feeling depressed whilst you're on medication, speak to your doctor. Just always do that. And there's another one, guanfacine or guanfacine. I don't know how you pronounce it. Facine sounds better.
Guanfacine sounds better.
Yeah, so it acts on a part of the brain to improve attention, says the NHS, and it also reduces blood pressure. It's given to teenagers and kids over the age of 5, but only if it's not possible to use the stimulants that I'd mentioned earlier.
That's really interesting to me that stimulants are kind of like the first thing they chuck at you. Because they're
works,
quite it works, but like it's I can imagine for a child that's like never like even experienced like obviously being drunk or any other like mind altering substance, that it's probably like very overwhelming for them to suddenly like just be given the stimulant drug.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about sort of drugging kids in a bit, legally speaking. But yeah, no, just to finish this off, the side effects of that one and the one I've just mentioned, you cannot give that to adults. It should not be given to adults.
Oh.
I'm not sure why. It literally doesn't say. I'm not sure why. But side effects, tiredness or fatigue, headache, abdominal pain, and dry mouth, which is kind of the opposite of the stimulants, right? But this is only offered to kids and teens. No, I mean as in tiredness or fatigue.
Okay.
You're not likely to be tired or fatigued on
stimulants.
I
was like, no, I definitely get a dry mouth.
Yeah, no, dry mouth.
I took 3 on a day accidentally that I was playing a gig. And that was very upsetting because I play guitar and sing at the same time, and I also have a water bottle next to me. But yeah, exactly. My lip was getting stuck to my teeth while I was singing.
Oh my God,
and it was horrifying.
Well, I mean, I kind of wanted to take some time to talk about our experiences on this. Sorry, Luke, but I kind of wanted to talk about. I mean, you could probably talk about. You've heard us talk about this before. You could probably add some to this, but I mean, this is the thing. I'm on this almost daily now, and it's great. It has made my life so much smoother. It's not made the ADHD go away by any means. I still need to remember to take it for one thing.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen all the time.
The ultimate downfall.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Look, I have this pill that will solve all of my problems.
I could just imagine you sitting on the opposite side of the room from your ADHD medication going, go and take it. And your body being like, no.
Look, that literally
go
happens.
and take it.
Yeah.
No.
That genuinely, literally happens. You give me the other side of the table from me, and I'm like, well, this will be a few hours, right? But about like sort of, I mean, how it feels.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I took it, I felt a little bit wired, right? I mean, your tolerance to it immediately is probably going to be quite low, and it kind of builds up a little bit over time. I mean, I've been going through titration. I went from 1 tablet up to, I think, 3 or 4, depending on how I'm feeling.
What is titration? Sorry.
Titration is just the process by which they decide what is your dosage, like what is your general prescription going to be on this drug, right? So I'm kind of going through that, and yeah, I mean, when I take it, sometimes I can feel a little bit wired. If you don't eat, it can make you feel kind of sick.
Yes.
So you need to eat. You need to eat with it, and apparently eating protein helps with the sort of absorption of it. If you hit the
you
right,
eat a lot of protein, so that's
I
good.
do eat a lot of protein, but if you hit the right dose, it kind of, you don't necessarily notice it very much, but everything just kind of feels a little bit smoother. I think the way that I first described it was, it's like my brain has been constantly on half-ass mode, and this one little pill switched my brain to full ass, you know, and suddenly I was able to focus on things, and suddenly I was able to, like, if I wanted to do a thing, I could do the thing.
Yeah.
It's like having the power of just constant hyper focus.
Power of being a normal person.
Well, no, though, because the thing is that while you've got that intense focus, you can also just misdirect it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you could be stuck, okay, I'm stuck in the shower. I'm stuck really like focusing on the shower, or I'm stuck really focusing on cleaning.
Yeah.
You need to set yourself up for success by making sure you direct yourself in the right way.
My experience, kind of similar. I started maybe like a year ago, and the first time that I took it, obviously I was like setting a stopwatch to see like when I was feeling the effects, kicked in, and the first thing I did was like start doing the washing up. So that's how it felt for me. Like I didn't feel wired when I had it. I just felt like my brain was like, oh, okay. Because like before I took it on like a normal day, it feels like there were all these thoughts going around in my brain and I couldn't control them. I couldn't like pick one out. And then I took the medication and I was just like, oh, okay. Kind of calmed me down. I was like, right, I'm going to wash the dishes. And every dish I washed felt like a reward.
Yeah.
I was like washing dishes. I was like, good job, Noah. And then other stuff, like I would always set a plan for my day, but I started taking the medication and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set the plan and then I'm going to do it. In terms of me, like I used to take it every day. And I'm on like a tiny dose. I'm on like 18 milligrams a day, which is like 1 pill, which is like similar to like what a child will have sometimes, because obviously everybody reacts to it differently. I only take it on days now where like I have to sit down and work, because otherwise it's quite easy for me to forget to eat enough. And if you don't eat enough, as Corey said, it leaves you feeling sick. For me, it feels like I'm about to have a panic attack a lot of the time.
It's a really difficult thing to explain when you don't eat enough on it, right? Because
yeah.
okay.
You feel lightheaded and I feel really weak.
It's like your insides have been scooped out.
Yeah. I feel really weak, and I feel really weak, but it feels like my body really wants to go, but because I feel so weak, my body can't go. But yeah, I mean, I used to take it daily, and for me at least, it was like during the day, if I was eating enough, if I was sticking to the plans that I was doing, had a great day, got to the end of the day, it was completely fine. Other times I'd like take it, and depending on like how much I did, it would leave me feeling a bit like, well, I didn't achieve much, and now I didn't eat enough, and now I'm just sat here kind of buzzing a bit. But yeah, I mean, overall, like I'm very glad I've been prescribed it.
I think the thing to pay attention to is that it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve every single problem, but it will, or it can rather, make some things a lot easier. I mean, for example, doing a Sci Guys day is way, way easier if I got this. Because it's a whole day and I'm able to stay focused on the thing the whole time. I'm able to do all the things that I need to get done. It's great. If I need to edit a video, then I can do that. If I need to do any kind of tasks, I can apply my focus much more easily because I'm not having to go with that uphill struggle of just getting to the point of being able to focus in the first place, right? So, I mean, these can be really, really great. But then we're adults, right? We're able to make that sort of decision for ourselves.
Yeah.
We've kind of been touching on this. I kind of want to talk a little bit about medicating kids, right? So the FDA has approved, a bunch of different ADHD medications for kids as young as 6. I mean, it literally says here, FDA approved medications currently on the market have been tested for safety and effectiveness in clinical trials of children 6 and older. But once a drug has been approved and is on the market, FDA is now asking for clinical trials with participants of children as young as 4 and 5. And I mean, people have said that it can, they've done the studies on it. It can be really essential. It can be helpful for these kids to be on this. And it says, left untreated, ADHD can have serious consequences. A child may fall behind in school, encounter difficulties in friendships, have conflicts with parents, and according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And it says studies show that children children with untreated ADHD have more emergency room visits and are more likely to have self-inflicted injuries than those treated for the disorder.
Yeah.
Untreated adolescents with ADHD are more likely to take risks such as drinking and driving. They have twice as many motor vehicle accidents as those who are treated.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of arguments for it. And I guess I understand that. But the one thing I would kind of point out is that when it comes to kids with ADHD, I mean, kids as young as 5, 6, 7, all of that sort of stuff, I feel like they're being medicated less because it's what is helpful to them and what they need.
Yeah.
And more because it's easier to deal with them when they just do what normal kids do.
Which is what a lot of the literature about ADHD kind of comes across as.
Yeah.
It's like, how can I make my life easier by sorting out my kid with ADHD rather than thinking like, oh yeah, like he's hyperactive, he runs around all the time. It's really annoying, but really what is... I mean, I don't have a kid with ADHD that I'm thinking about medicating or anything, so obviously I only have the opinion that I have. But I'm just thinking like what in a 5-year-old's life is so important that they need a stimulant in order to be able to, you know, fulfill like their daily tasks.
And the thing is as well, have there been other things that have been considered? Because, you know, what you mentioned was that when you were in school, your teacher just let you get up and walk around when you needed to.
Yeah.
If you make these sort of little accommodations, maybe you won't need to give a kid stimulants. And yes, that takes more funding, but that's the thing. That would take more funding. If we fund schools better, we don't just have everyone, you know, getting better. We can also make it much, much easier for neurodivergent kids to actually succeed. And maybe we won't see them having as many sort of mental health issues or other associated issues or needing to be medicated, you know, as often or, you know, as young as they are, you know, because yes, ADHD does cause impulsivity. Yes, it does have all of these sort of things related to it. But does medicating a kid really truly solve the root cause of the problem or help them learn to deal with those sort of deal with it themselves?
For me, it's kind of like I understand what the side effects feel like for my body. And I'm an adult and I got to do adult things and that's fine. But I just like, I don't know, just even like with the risk of the side effects being like really not nice, because I've had a few days where I've taken my medication and not eaten and not done anything, and it really feels horrible on my body at least. So I just that's kind of scary when it comes to 5-year-olds.
Yeah, and that's not to say that no child should ever be on ADHD, because sometimes it could be helpful for them. But the point is more that I think we need to see ADHD as a less of a thing that unruly kids have. A thing that unruly kids have that needs to be fixed, and more of a way of sort of engaging with the world that is different from most other people, because it doesn't just have negative outcomes, right? I mean, people with ADHD, I mean, I guess this is more anecdotal than it is necessarily, and I'll be clear about that. I think this is more anecdotal than it is necessarily like strictly found in the literature, because there haven't really been studies on this. But a lot of people with ADHD kind of seem to have better pattern recognition, all of these sorts of things, right? In the same sense that sort of autistic people being autistic doesn't just mean, oh, there are all of these negatives and you can't do X, Y, Z in the same way that someone who is neurotypical can. There's also, I mean, let's say benefits to autism in the same sense that there are some benefits to ADHD. I mean, like, I can work flat out for 14 hours and be fine.
No, it's just like the benefit of like you have a brain that works differently. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a bad thing. And it's kind of like what you were saying about accommodations earlier. Like there are ways that you can accommodate like autistic kids. Like
absolutely.
Noise cancelling headphones, like sensory stuff to play with. The same with kids with ADHD. Like my teacher was allowing me to like walk around the classroom and like is it like the social model of disability where it's like the issue isn't always necessarily the fact that your kid has ADHD. It's the fact that your kid is expected in this society to sit still in class and to not get up and to not engage with like everything that's going on around them. So like, I guess it would mostly be a last resort when you're putting a kid that young on medication.
Yeah, and only if it helps them. And when I say last resort, I mean, okay, are they having a bad time? Is it difficult for them to do this and that? Not just what I think they should be doing, but what is their experience, you know? And what you're saying there about, you know, those sort of accommodations like fidget toys and all of this sort of stuff, I'm very much looking forward to having a kid that goes to school and having a teacher call me up and say, oh, your kid just got up and went to the toilet when I told them they couldn't. And for me to say, yeah, because you don't get to decide when they do that. And with any of those sorts of things, I very much want to be in you know, the sort of child's corner where it's like, okay, maybe just let them do what they need to do so long as they're getting what they need to get done. Yeah. Right? Because it's very easy to drive a kid with ADHD away from school by just making them care about it less and less, because that's the thing. If you have ADHD and you don't care about something, it's incredibly difficult to follow through with that. And being in an environment like school where you get none of the accommodations that you need, teachers just treat you like a problem child, your parents think, I just need to medicate you, it's not necessarily going to set a kid up for, the best life with ADHD. I mean, maybe, they'll be fine just being on the stimulants, being on whatever medication they need to be on. But still, we should focus way, way harder on helping kids, have a better experience for themselves before we just give them drugs to make them easier to deal with.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think we should give more drugs to kids. I think even kids that don't need them.
Just see what happens.
Yeah.
I love that clip. Thank you. Well, I think that's pretty much everything for today, but there's one more thing to go. It's a quick fire quiz.
Dun, 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 dun. Ooh. ADHD Medication Edition.
So the rules for the quick fire quiz are the same as always. I'll ask one question. That's one question between the two of you. The first person to buzz in with the correct answer wins. And what do they win, Luke?
Some methylphenidate.
I'm not.
You got plenty.
No.
Share.
That is so incredibly illegal.
Learn to share.
No. I'm not going to do that. So, Luke, what is your buzzer?
I can't wait for Corey to give me some of his methylphenidate.
Noah, what is your buzzer? Very good. It's a much quicker buzzer and is much more likely to win. So, the question for you is not so much a question as it is a statement. Name a neurotransmitter that methylphenidate affects. Yes, Noah.
Dopamine.
Ding, ding, ding. That is correct.
Yes!
You win some methylphenidate. Your own methylphenidate, which is in a bottle downstairs. But that is all from us, I think. Before we go, we'd like to thank all of our patrons with an extra special thank you to executive producers Denito and Glitchrabbit, and thank you for watching. You can find the 4 references down in the description. Subscribe to new episodes every Sunday, and why not leave us a nice wee comment? You can support the pod at patreon.com/Sci Guys, or you can find and contact us at Sci Guys Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and at Sci Guys on TikTok too. Or you can send us an email at sciguyspod@gmail.com.
That's sciguyspod@gmail.com.
Sci Guys Pod
at gmail.com. You can follow me at NotCorey everywhere.
You can follow me at Luke Cutforth everywhere.
You can follow me at NOAHFINNCE everywhere, except for Twitter, which is NOAHFINAdams, and TikTok, which is the NOAHFINNCE.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Listen to my music.